Hi, I'm Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, and I'm here with my amazing co-host, Dr. Pat Baccili, and welcome to The Psychic in the Doc. Transformation Network celebrates diversity, and since June is Pride Month, we're honoring and acknowledging our brothers and sisters in the LGBT community. We are all members of one big human family. And this month, we have some really fascinating guests who are not just members of the LGBT community, but creative geniuses who have a wealth of experience to share with everyone. Our guest today is Herb Ankrom, who is a film and television executive producer and head of Big Ginger Productions. Herb started his career as an assistant to the producers on the TV sitcom Roseanne back in the 1990s. And since then, he's produced some blockbuster movies, including The Bourne Identity, Batman and Robin, and Cruel Intentions. Some of his TV projects include Extreme Makeover, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and Netflix $1 Million Beach House. And there's one project that he did that really freaks me out. That's Open Water 3 Cage Dive. So welcome to The Psychic in the Doc, Herb Ankrom. Great to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to have you.
Thank you. Let me clarify that I helped produce shows like The Bourne Identity, stuff like that. I necessarily wasn't the producer, but I was on the shows and on the movies on some of those projects that I was helping, but was not the executive producer of.
Yeah, how cool. I wish I was right there with you.
I would love to take credit for Bourne Identity for myself, but I was happy to be a part of it.
So did you get to have lunch with Matt Damon?
Oh yes, every day, and we're still friends. And whenever I do see him, it's wonderful. And I'm very close with his assistant, so I keep in touch through him more than Matt in person. But whenever I see Matt, it's like no time has passed. He's a lovely person.
That's awesome. So Herb, I have to ask, what got you attracted to the TV and the film industry? I mean, it had to, this seems like that it's just part of your DNA. I mean, was it when you were a little kid, you just couldn't you wanted to be there? How did that happen for you?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've always loved the movies and loved television and both of them, entertainment, period. I guess the first time I ever thought, wow, about movies was my family when my dad was military and we lived in Europe. My parents took me to see Gone with the Wind in a big opera house in Vienna. And
Wow.
It was very impressive to me, not only the movie, but the grandeur. And of course, being in a gilded, opera house, all of it was like, wow, this is amazing. So, and then as I got older and graduated college or went to college, I was like, maybe, I was a business major. And then I was like, I'm miserable. I can't do this. And I dropped out, lived in LA for a year and a half, pursued acting. And was like, acting is not my thing because you can't be in control of your career unless you're someone like Tom Cruise. But I saw what producers did, and I was like, that's me. So I went back to college and graduated and moved back to California with my college degree in television production, and moved up, through the ranks from production assistant to executive producer over the last 25 years. It's scary.
Wow. Yeah. I know that you're quite the athlete. I understand you're a really great snow skier.
Love snow.
And yeah, I heard that you do rings around a lot of the people that you're skiing with. But I have to ask as well. Okay, now I'm from Florida. I know that you're in Florida.
Yes.
I like my water more of a liquid variety. Okay, so I'm more of a snorkeler and a scuba diver. Do you snorkel or scuba dive?
I do both. I'm not certified in scuba diving, but I've done a number of resort dives where you go down below, no deeper than like 50 feet. So I do love it. I have not taken the time to get my certification. I would love to do that. But I do. I love summer sports in the water, beaches and stuff like that. With my big ginger complexion, it's not the easiest. Winter sports tend to be better because I don't burn. But I love, it's kind of weird. I do love to be in a swimming pool and in the Caribbean or wherever it is. But yeah, it's hard. I have to apply myself with 50.
Well, one of the reasons I'm asking is I know that you're executive producer, or you served as the executive producer on the Lionsgate film Open Water 3 Cage Dive.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, that is such an intense film. I mean, and it involves sharks. Okay. And growing up where I did, always encountering sharks, I have to admit, Herb, that movie really freaked me out. Okay. And I know that producers aren't always on set, but were you? And if so, did you spend any time in the water?
Yeah. The majority of the movie was shot, directed by a friend of mine, Gerald, who's Australian. So the primary part of the primary feature, the principal photography, the majority of it was done in Australia, because he would use all the benefits of being an Australian with the tax breaks and things like that. We shot a little bit of it in California, and then all of post-production was done in California. So I was only in the California portions, but there was some in the water in California, yes, very cold waters. But most of the time I was not in the water myself. And there was some live, tiger shark, not tiger shark, but lemon sharks and things like that are non-carnivores, allegedly. So there was some of that, but most of the obviously really kind of vicious stuff was all special effects.
Yeah.
Wow.
Herb, it's really great to have you here. I'm so curious. I think, growing up, I was like you. If you were looking for me and you couldn't find me, I'm a kid from the Bronx, New York. If you're looking for me and you couldn't find me, I'm in the movie theater. It didn't matter. All of the horror movies you ever thought to imagine, everything from the Colossus of New York all the way out. And what I'm fascinated by, and I'd love to ask you this question, is, one, I think something planetarily has happened in 1995. I just want to say that out of the gate. I talk about being taken over by an alien, and so therefore that's how I got in a doctoral program. But I want to ask you, how has the landscape, and for lack of a better word, how has the landscape of Hollywood film and movies changed? How is it changing? And the reason I want to ask that is, we're in a whole new world now of production. Yeah. From your perspective, what have you seen change in the industry?
Oh gosh, a number of things. I mean, things are always changing and growing, and then some things always stay the same.
Yeah.
So it's kind of odd. But I think that the big studio system is kind of really gone. With all the streaming services and all of that, movies and television shows are being made in such various different ways, and things are, I think they're really kind of looking at projects in a lot different way than it used to be, where you had to strictly go through the studio system and agents and all of that. I say that, but then it's also still kind of the same with a lot of the, the major studios aren't going anywhere. Warner Brothers, Disney, they're
Right.
not going anywhere. But I think that they are changing their, they're not making as many movies as they used to.
Right.
They're more focused on blockbusters, things like that, where independent films are being done in so many various different ways, and obviously being bought on streamers, and where the studios just can't afford to make them anymore.
What I think Herb is saying is so important, because I found myself sitting there the other day as I saw an ad pop up for Disney Plus. And it's like, buy Disney Plus and sign up for Disney Plus. And I realized I took up my bill for my cable service, my television service, and I took up my bill. And I said, oh my God, I'm like paying for all of these things like a couple $100. Oh, but
Yep.
wait, Pat, you just bought streaming for Disney, streaming for Netflix, streaming for HBO Max, streaming for AMC. You just bought all those things. And so it's daunting now, because, if you don't look and say, well, wait a minute, I'm dishing out this money over here, but my industry causes me to really subscribe to these things.
Yes.
And what I'm finding is, when you talk to people that are so savvy about this, what they say is, wait a minute, why are you paying for that service? There are TVs that are smart. They can bring this on. So when Herb comes back, when we come back from break, when Herb comes back, one of the things that we're talking about is the decision points that he talked about as the industry changes from live streaming, and what the public has to decide. If you're sitting here like me, and I've got my cable thing over here that I'm paying a couple $100 for, and then I realize I'm streaming to all these other places. There's never been, Herb, what we're saying is, there's never been more options for consumers, right? In the world, there's never been more options for us. When we come back, we're going to be talking about, how do you become this amazing producer? How do you get involved with projects that just hold your heart so near and dear? And what can we know about walking this pathway and being adaptable? Because if you're a producer of anything, you have had to adapt and change. Let's take a short break, Mark. We'll be right back.
I'm Mark Anthony. You're listening to The Psychic and the Doc. I'm back with my illustrious and never unopinionated co-host, Dr. Pat Baccili. And we have a great guest today, Herb Ankrom. And Herb is an amazingly successful TV and film producer. And Herb, obviously, you're here not just because you're at the top of the food chain in the production world, but also because you are an outstanding member of the LGBT community. Do you feel that being gay has presented opportunities or obstacles in the film industry for you?
We can
and
both
for
answer
other
that question.
people? Yeah, other people.
I can go off of what I've experienced. Little back thing about me or whatever is, I was not out when I moved to Los Angeles, but then I did come out in Los Angeles after about being in the business for about 5 years. I've never felt myself personally, I've never felt hindered by the business as to who I am, but I'm not in front of the camera, so that's not an issue. Not that it should be even for actors, but it is somewhat even today.
Yeah.
Back then it certainly was. Now it's a lot more open, but there's still, I think, more male actors than female actors who struggle with being who they truly are, because the world isn't ready to accept an actor is not really playing. That's not really King Arthur out there. That's an actor. So whether they're gay or straight, what does it matter? They're playing King Arthur, but
Right.
That's a whole other story. But for me, I've never felt hindered or held back or anything. It's a very, I think the business, there's so many people in the business that are in our community that it's very open. Once in a while, I might run into a co-producer or an executive producer or something like that who, may not be the most friendly. But they're also probably that way with everybody, to be quite honest with you. They're just bitter people, but I've been very fortunate. I'm very fortunate to have always worked with people who just let me be me. And, you know, it's, and I will say I'm not someone who also necessarily wears it on my sleeve. I don't think I hide anything,
Right.
but I also am not someone who's just out there and huge and everything else, because it is the workplace. And, and I don't expect people to talk about their personal life, whether they're straight or gay at work. But if it's topic of conversation, I'm like right in there. I'm like, hey, this is me, but I've never felt hindered by it, which I'm very blessed that way, because I know some people are.
That's interesting, because from a legal standpoint, we're always hearing about equality. Everybody wants equality. And what you just explained is what I think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was getting at, that we should be judged by the content of our character.
Yes.
So you're successful because you're really good at what you do. And it has nothing to do with your personal life, your orientation, what have you.
Right.
Because, so many people make a big deal of this on both sides of the coin. I've worked in a number of law firms where, it was very, very conservative, and others that were very, very liberal. The court system always seems to be about 15 to 20 years behind socially, but that's where everybody goes to make the changes is in the legal profession. So I really appreciate what you were saying about, if you're good at what you do, you should be able to rise to the top. But I read an interview. One of my favorite actors is Sir Ian McKellen, because he played Gandalf. Okay. All right. And Magneto. All right. So I like fantasy. So Magneto. Yeah. And he said that half of Hollywood is gay, but afraid to admit it. And I think that you touched on that. Why do you think that is in a business that seems to be so welcoming to the LGBT community?
Right. Well, I think the biggest thing is that Hollywood, for me, when I take a step back and I look at it, Hollywood is a bubble,
Yes.
And the truth is, it is a bubble. And yes, there are a lot of people in our community that are out, and a lot of them that aren't. But what we produce goes out around the world, and you have to keep that in mind. And like, for me, it's always been, again, I am just who I am, and you take me or leave me, and you hire me, you don't hire me. I don't fight it. I don't, because everybody's at a different place. Until you've walked a mile in somebody else's shoes, that's me. I just don't judge them. I might get upset, or I might think to myself, oh my gosh, why are you so prehistoric, or who are, whatever. But I can't, it took me 30 years to get to where I accepted myself fully. It takes other people different time. So I'm not going to judge that. It's just who I am. And people want to judge me for not being a judge person. They can judge me all they want to, but yes, our product goes out around the world, and a lot of places in the world, they're not as open and as free as we are in the United States, and certainly not in Hollywood. So that you just kind of have to take it. And a lot of people who are actors who are putting on the screen, they kind of know that. And if they are, if they either have to accept the fact that they're going to be who they are and the world is going to accept them, or I guess they kind of keep it to themselves because they know some places in the world, maybe people won't go see their movies because they're gay, or they won't buy their product, or they don't believe again, for me, it's like Neil Patrick Harris, prime example, played the most heterosexual character in that show, where he was the biggest player. But yet he's someone that I know that has a great relationship with his husband and kids, and he's completely. But that's an actor, and for me, I can escape who they are personally when I'm watching a movie, because that they're playing a role. But some people can't do that. So I think that's why. But I think that's the main reason, is because the world, everybody's not the same as everybody in Hollywood. It's a bubble, And it's a bubble that sometimes the people of Hollywood actually need to step out of once in a while to realize too that they're being a little elitist. But that's another whole story too.
Do tell. No.
I love this conversation because it brings up, conversations about who we hire, who we bring in, who those people are. And I love the way you talked about this. One of the things that we bump up against is, when there are roles out there for people, who do you fill them with? So for example, the question about Bohemian Rhapsody and the portrayal of Freddie Mercury.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, you could not convince me Rami Malek was not him. You couldn't. I don't care what you said to me, or I'm just like, watched it 100 times and I'm thinking
good.
like reincarnated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the flip side of it is you get a series like The L Word. Love The L Word. Love the second version of The L Word. But those roles were not necessarily filled by gay and lesbian people. This is really the interesting conversation, because Hollywood is one bubble conversation, but there are conversations across the planet about this.
Yes.
And I want to ask you, times have changed. 16-year-olds are identifying as gay and lesbian, openly identifying.
Yeah.
Gloria Steinem said it best a gazillion years ago when we burned our bras, just saying. I had to have a backup bra because I've always been a little chesty, just saying. But she said, when she stood up and said to the women's organization who wanted to not include lesbians and now, and she said, we're all lesbians. You would think that that would cause so much backlash. And I want to ask you about this. How much courage do we need to really make profoundly powerful and true films?
Well, probably incredible courage if you're looking for not having box office. That's the truth of the sad part.
Yeah.
Because you just automatically, if you're going to be truthful and honest about everything and really brutally honest, you're going to turn off some people because they can't handle it. And as far as I think that there's so many really good actors out there who identify publicly as gay or lesbian that for L Word, they should have really focused a little bit more on getting that. The sad part is it comes down to, again, box office and dollars. And if they have an actress who is a name who can sell that show better, they're going to put them in there.
Yeah.
And
she did, by the way.
Yeah. Well, and who was it? It was
Jennifer Beal.
Jennifer Beal.
Yeah. Because all we can see her as is flash dance with the thing coming down.
Yes,
so you see her in the L Word, right? Yeah.
And, so that just comes down to economics. And that's the sad part. And, and again, that's where it's kind of hard for me as a producer, because I realize the responsibility that I want to hire people who are, a certain person or who it is. But at the same time, I'm like, if I hire this other person, the show's going to be seen by a lot more people and make it even more of probably a profound impact, because people were willing to watch it because it had Jennifer Beal in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the minute that you saw her in the first L Word show, you saw her and you saw that flash dance moment of her sitting on a chair. I think every woman in America tried to get a contraption like that and pulled on the thing and splash. And that's what you remember. And, and what you're talking about is literally the decision-making process that every corporation makes, that every decisions are made by. That's the world we live in, isn't it, though, Herb? I mean, that's it.
I'm asked who am I going to hire?
Yes.
And it's a roundabout way saying you better hire diverse. You better hire, even though, and that's hard at sometimes, because I have a camera guy that I absolutely work the best with, and producers that I love, that I've worked with over the years. And if they don't fit right now, if they don't fit the criteria for that network, I won't be able to hire them, even though they're really qualified and they're people who I work with and trust and can do a great job. I have to look elsewhere because they want to make sure that the crew is diverse. And I respect that, because in one side of me, because I've worked in this business for 25 years. And to be honest with you, I think I've worked with maybe 3 bosses that were female. So I understand wanting to diverse and get more women and more African American, more Asian, more, people, give them the opportunities to work. But it's hard when you've got people you love working with that you wanted to hire and you're told not to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so it's a double-edged sword. It's a really
Yeah.
interesting but tough time right now too. So
Yeah. And, let's talk about this when we come back, because,
Yeah.
one of the top films that came out at the Oscars, certainly, profoundly powerful film on, Ma Rainey. And when you think about Ma May Rainey, and you think about what she really was. I mean, this is a woman that got arrested in 1925, for her house in Harlem for having a lesbian party. And so the film comes out, and the question then becomes, was that an adequate portrayal of who she was? And does it matter? That's the question. Let's talk about that much more. And what is the future? What does Herb look at? And he thinks about, I'm looking at the future of Hollywood here. What am I most excited about? Let's take a short break, everybody. We'll be right back.
I'm Mark Anthony, and you're listening to The Psychic and the Doc. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Pat Baccili.
Yep.
And today's guest is Herb Ankrom, who is an executive producer in TV and movies. And we are talking about the role of LGBT people in the entertainment industry. Herb, I have a question. And I know that we want to get into the future, but I'm looking at the past. I mean, so many creative people throughout history. I mean, we're talking Aristotle, Michelangelo, Leonardo, Tchaikovsky, Gertrude Stein, Oscar Wilde, Elton John, Halston, Liberace, Versace, Rock Hudson. I mean, just coming
icons.
Yeah, all these icons, and they're all such creative people. Do you think that there is a connection between their inner turmoil? Because most of these people, I mean, if you look at someone like Rock Hudson, Montgomery Clift, okay, they were in the film industry and they were two of the hottest box office draws in history at the time, but they were living these extremely closeted lives, yet cranked out incredible performances. Do you think that it's possible this inner turmoil that so many of these geniuses have experienced is what triggered their creativity?
For sure. I mean, I guarantee you that a lot of the emotion you saw on the screen, especially from someone like Rock Hudson or Montgomery Clift, came from their own experience, just transferring it into the role of whatever they were doing. And Montgomery Clift and Rock Hudson and many others, they did live a very closeted life for the public, but the Hollywood people all knew who they were. That was back in the day when a PR machine was a real PR machine, and they could really cover up anything. And they also could get a hold of any press clippings. The studios ran their lives and they ran the papers, and they managed to keep everything kind of on the DL, but a lot of people in town knew what was going on. And the same things today. In all reality, there's a lot of people that are probably, behind closed doors doing all kinds of things, but they managed to keep everything out of the press. But all of that, to be said, I think that all of those people took their life experiences and being rejected. I think being rejected and being judged for something that you can't change is something that happens a lot. And I think that the creative people take those experiences and put it in their jobs and on the screen and in their lyrics and all of that. I don't know how else to explain it except the fact that it is an outlet for them. And that's probably why they got into, not only why they got into doing what they're doing, because they could use their creativity as an outlet for their expression, but also because it is a business that, even though over the years it has grown and more accepting, it's always been accepting to some degree.
I'm sorry,
more than others.
I wanted to bring something up because, I've been doing research on our guests and what we're doing, and an article popped up on the internet in the last couple of days, and Ricky Martin was talking about that infamous interview where Barbara Walters went right for the jugular, put him on the spot.
multiple times.
Multiple times. Yeah. And that was what, maybe 20 years ago.
Probably.
And so you've been in the industry that long, and Ricky Martin said pretty much that Barbara Walters destroyed his career at the time for essentially outing him.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know if that would do that much damage today, but it would depend. Let's say it was somebody like Chris Pratt, and I'm not suggesting, and I'm not saying, but well, no, because we don't want to get sued. But yeah, he isn't, and that he isn't. But let's say that all of a sudden somebody with that type of image and the type of movies that he makes was found out to be gay. Could that damage his career now, or do most people not care? Or what's your take on that?
Well, I would love to say that that it wouldn't affect their career at all. I think ultimately, I think it really comes down to the actor or actress.
Yeah.
The magnitude of their celebrity. Also, I think the way that they approach it. If people come at it, they're just like, it's me, get over it. You know what I mean? Then a lot
Adam
of
Lambert.
yeah. And they kind of, I feel like people that nowadays are kind of like, oh yeah, you're right. Who cares? But if people come at it, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, or oh, I regret that this came out, or then they're giving people permission to not like them, in my opinion. When I came out, I told everybody in my life, I was like, this is me, get over it. And everybody was like, okay. And they moved right on.
Don't you love the response where they say to you, duh, we knew, like what rock did you just crawl out under?
Yeah.
You sit there with your mom and you're like, and your mom says, duh, that's why we kicked you out. Like, we knew. I mean, but it's still agonizing.
It is still agonizing.
Speak about it.
That is the really, really sad part, is that the young people, or however young you are when you go through it, each person, no matter what generation we're in, no matter how open it is, it's agonizing for each person. And each person has to go through that, which is a shame. And why you have to even out yourself is amazing. I think we are getting to a place now where you don't necessarily have to out yourself. People kind of are just, the young kids aren't really having to do it. But I still think that the young kids who do identify even in high school go through the brutal bullying or whatever. But that's all teenagers, and all teenagers bully each other for all kinds of different reasons. So you can't really judge them for bullying one, because they all get bullied in some way or some form. But it is amazing how all of my friends were all like, duh.
Well, we saw it just in the headlines, Herb. We saw it in the headlines with Ellen. I mean, I wrote Ellen letters. What happened to Ellen?
Horrible.
And I still can't tease it apart. I'm trying, and crushed her. And I love that she came out and talked about it. And by the way, she's going to do another season of her show.
Another talk show, another season of her.
Another season of it. I don't know how she found the stamina and the chutzpah to do it. And she's going to do it. But I couldn't understand it. And I just wondered, I want to ask you this question. The powers to be that wanted to bring Ellen down.
Are you talking about the first time or the second?
Let's talk about the second. Well, first time, the first time
was horrific.
It was horrific.
Horrific.
The second time was even more horrific for me, because this is a woman who came out and did so much for people in her show. And the things that were said about her, and just contrary to what some people said the reality of that was. I just don't know how you recover. And I just wonder how much of that had to do with Ellen, or how much of that had to do with lesbian Ellen.
The second time around, I personally feel like it's more Ellen than a lesbian Ellen.
Yeah.
Because I think everybody really loved her, or they still do.
Yeah.
But I also, as a producer, have friends who have been working on her show, and in the past have worked on her show, and I know the environment that they worked in.
Yeah.
And there's part of me that believes that Ellen didn't know what was going on, but there's also a part of me that feels like, Ellen didn't know and just looked the other way, or she's, from what I've been told by friends who have worked on the show, is not the easiest person to work for. which that doesn't really matter. However, in the era that we're in, it's hard because she projects this really amazing, don't hate, or what is it she closes every show with?
Yeah, I totally get it.
Be kind, and it's like, wow, if behind the doors you're doing the completely opposite, then you don't deserve to be out there on the air telling people to be kind if you're not being kind yourself.
Yeah.
So that's a tough one for me, because
It's a tough one for me, Herb. And I think this is for another show. You'll have to come back and we'll have to talk about women. Because we watched it with Amy Klobuchar. I mean, I look at Amy, I look at myself as the CEO of a company and host of a show.
Mhm.
And boy, to get to this place, I knew nothing about the industry, and ignorance was my greatest gift. But you find that you set really high standards and you hold people accountable for them. And, I just wonder, sometimes if Amy Klobuchar were a male senator, and by the way, Amy, we're not saying you're gay. We don't know. I don't know what you are. It's not what we're talking about. But do we hold differences between gay men and women in the industry? Your opinion.
I don't think so. I don't know. But then again, it's like, I don't know, every job and every meeting and everything is different. I haven't seen a difference. And when it comes to Ellen, Kathy Kennedy is one of the toughest producers.
Yes.
Like she's married to Frank Marshall. I did The Born Identity. Frank Marshall was the producer. I work for Frank. Kathy, I know her from, she's tough, but she respects everybody she works with. And when you hear some of the stories about, like, you can't look me in the eye.
Yeah. I mean, what we're talking about are nuances that don't get talked about, in the world and in the industry. And I think that's what Herb is talking about. I would love to have a conversation. Maybe we just skip the break. I would like to hear what projects he's most excited about moving forward. And we're going to skip the break, Herb, if we could, because what we're talking about are some of these things, especially when you're talking about high powered people, I call them nuances, right?
Yes.
Those of us that are here, we can be a little quirky, just saying. We can have some really quirky, things. But I want to ask you about this. These people have been major contributors. And see, that's really what I want the message in the show to be. There are major contributors, whether you are gay or not. There are major contributors. I look at RuPaul and I think the rock star of understanding our trans friends, rock star to bring that forward. I want to ask you, as you sit there,
and all the Emmys they're winning. I mean, it's amazing.
Left and right.
Really great.
Nobody even wants to do a show like him. They're like,
I know.
no.
Yeah. Right.
What do you, as you look ahead for yourself? I know there are films you're most excited about, and you're looking ahead, and you've got your eye on the future. What kind of films are you most excited about doing?
Well, I mean, the majority of my career is television.
Yes.
And unscripted. So but yes, I've got, like, right now I've got a scripted show that I'm trying to get people's eyes on. That is, it's actually a period piece, but it's got 4 very strong female roles for leads, and it takes place during the Civil War era. It's about these 4 women who come together to try to stop the Civil War and to help end slavery. And it's a really awesome, but very dark. And it takes place in New Orleans. So it's voodoo, like all kinds of interesting things.
I love that.
Very well written script. But I think that it shows, because two of the characters are real people. It shows that even way back then, they were women trying to make a difference, and they're strong women, and they're really out there doing their thing. I don't know. I just trying to do, I'd love to do, if I'm doing an unscripted show, I want to do shows that really show, people working together to try to do better things, to better each other's lives and things. And that's why I loved Extreme Makeover Home Edition. I mean, if you're going to use TV in reality, then let's not knock everybody down. I mean, drama sells, we'll be honest, but there can be drama that doesn't bring everybody down. There can be drama, people, if you're following real life and real experiences, there's drama in everybody's lives, and, and jobs and things that are conflict and all of that. how do they solve it without bringing people down? How do you solve it where it's helping people instead of bringing them down?
You
I
know,
would love to get that.
I think that shows like that are really, you know, it's like teaching children how to work and play well with others.
Yes.
You know, and as adults, we need that too. And I always liked what you did with Extreme Makeover. You get a diverse group of people together, you know, because let's say the architects and the designers are gay, and you know some of the engineers are lesbian, and some of the painters are you know this ethnic group and that ethnic group. The truth of the matter is you have a better end product with, I think, a more diverse input, because it's more interesting then.
Sure.
You know, it's like if everything's, you know, a piece of white bread, okay, the world isn't Wonder Bread. You know, the world is a multi-grained, you know, smorgasbord of flavors. And I've even heard an ancient Islamic saying that Allah delights in wondrous variety. And if we were all supposed to be the same, then we'd be like a school of fish. We'd be the same size, the same color. We'd react the same way to stimuli, but we don't. And so that's what I appreciate what you're doing with that. But I do have a question. And Dr. Pat, I'm interested to hear your take on this too. Okay, I know we're talking about Ellen, but I think one of the things about Ellen is lesbian women don't seem to frighten, I don't know if that's the right word, people the way a gay man does. You know, like people like, oh,
I got the answer to that.
She's a lesbian. Okay. But if you put a gay
You go first, Herb, then I'll go.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Well, I mean, like, you know, Pete Buttigieg, like, you know, but now he's,
I mean, I think there was a lot of people who don't necessarily accept the gay world or think about the gay world very much, but liked Pete Buttigieg just because he's a likable person. But I think that because we live in a male dominant world, their fantasy, whether it's lesbian or not, their fantasies have always been two women together. So they just love that. But we also live in a male dominant world where they can't even imagine having a relationship with another man. So I think that that's why it's been throughout history more acceptable to be two women than ever to be two men, because the world focuses on the strength of a man. They are the backbone. They are the supporters. They are the blah, 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 blah. And they cannot be macho and they cannot be manly if they're having a relationship with another man. So and it just disgusts, I mean, it's amazing, sad that it disgusts people to this day. I mean, it's disgusts a lot of people where they'll be like, oh, two women, it's hot. So.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I think that's where it is. I don't know what the doctor agrees with, but I think that's where it comes from.
Oh, I can hardly wait. Dr. Pat?
Well, first of all, you nailed it. I mean, there's always been before we even had the word gay, I don't even know when that happened, but before the word gay, the fantasy of two women or multiple women together, geez, how many vampire movies does that show up in? Yeah. Hello, thank you, Anne Rice, for rewriting Sleeping Beauty. If you've never read the Anne Rice Sleeping Beauty series under a whole nother name, read that thing. But I have to talk to the new breed. I'm sorry, Asia Kate, don't get mad at me. And I want to talk to these women and talk about these women. This is the new face. Beyond Kristen Stewart and other people that had this face, what Asia Kate Dillon has done for talking binary and binary language, and what the series Billions has done to give her that role, it moves us into a whole new place. And here's what I mean about this, Herb, and I'd love for you to comment on it. We now are introducing a new way of being into a very popular series. And people are now more aware. So we're not saying she, we're saying it or they. And Orange is the New Black did the same thing. You know, this is really, for me, when I see something like this, it's a new level of awareness for all of us. It doesn't matter if you're at Stonewall or not. The other thing, to answer to your question, Mark, is it depends. If you look like me and you put on lipstick before you come on a show, and you have the appearance of a societal acceptance, you're right. But if you don't, or you see me on my 1961 chopped black Harley, send you the picture, riding down the streets in Capitol Hill, short sleeve shirt, making a lot of noise. It's different.
Mm.
You know what I mean, Herb?
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
different.
it's I mean, I hate to use catchphrases and stuff like that, but it's like people are much more accepting in the world of like a lipstick lesbian than they are of a butch lesbian. I mean, it's just, yeah,
Yeah.
sadly, but that's that's the
That's
world we
what the
live in.
L word, absolutely the L word, really portrayed in a
Right,
lot of
yes.
ways. And,
Yeah.
but
I love the world. I mean, when looking forward,
Yeah.
I have it's fine line for me. I mean,
Okay.
I love the fact that I think everybody should be accepted for where they are in their life and what they're going through. And again, like if you don't walk a mile in their shoe, you shouldn't judge.
Right.
I still do have I'm still trying to figure out where I am with young people, being, instead of he or she, the whole it or they, especially when they're not 18 yet, they haven't gone through puberty, they haven't, it could be a complete, like when I was younger, I love GI Joes and stuff like that, and I played war with my brother out in the woods, and I still was still gay. So I think that there might be young people out there who might like to dress up when they're
Yep.
5 or 6, but by the time they're 16, they're like, why in the world did I ever put a dress on? So I don't know. It's really, I love the parents who just let their kids be their kids without, but I don't know necessarily that they need to call the school and be like, you need to call Joan now because that's what she's saying at home. I don't, it's very
It's complex.
It's very complex.
It's complex. And I think that's what we have to acknowledge,
Yes.
Because
don't judge other people for having,
don't judge other people.
Trying to figure out where they stand on it. I don't.
Well,
and it is about pride.
Yeah.
It is.
Perfect word.
And what I'm hearing is from all of us is that you can't just make generalizations.
No.
It's like all gay men don't dress up as women. All lesbians don't, dress up like lumberjacks. Okay, the LGBT community is just as diverse as any other segment of society.
100%.
And it's people have to, I mean, it gets back to work and play well with others. It's
respect.
Yeah, and I've spent a fair amount of time in Asia. Okay, and I was in isolated areas in Southeast Asia where I was my friend and I that I was traveling with, they were the only white people there. Okay, and so I got to feel what it was like to be on the other end of the bigoted spectrum. I spent time in Japan.
To be the minority.
To be the minority. I remember, like, when I was in Japan, I'd walk down the street and women would clutch their purses. And I was telling friends of mine that, and the African-American guys that I hang out with were like, well, now you know what we go through all the time. And people were generalizing about me because I was taller than most of them and I'm white. And so I think that it's very important. And if we have a lesson, or one of the many lessons from this show, is that take people at face, I don't want to say face value, but we have to treat people on the basis of how you want to be treated yourself.
Hello. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah.
You betcha.
And I want to bring up this last point because I know we've got to run. One of the things that is so important for us to recognize is this is a diverse population. And often when we refer to LGBTQ community, people have a version that is all white, like here we are. And I will tell you that the greatest struggles that I've seen, the greatest kids that I've saved from suicide have been children of color.
Yeah.
And I don't want us to lose sight of this, especially in this Pride Month and Hollywood, for those actors. And, and I'm thinking about Kevin Smith, and I'm thinking about a couple of other people. I know Jeffrey Bowman in American Horror Story. I mean, there are a lot of these folks. They have an additional challenge. And I want to make sure, Herb, that what you said is we got to get behind and support people. This is a time of diversity. It really is.
Mm,
You know,
100%.
we've got to do something different here,
Yeah.
I think.
Well, like, yes, I believe that until they, until they do something that they don't need that they do something that I feel like I can't support, that I'm going to support them in their decisions that they're making, especially if they're not hurting somebody else. If it's their choice to do what they're doing for themselves, and this is who they are, and it's their genuine in their heart, and this is exactly what they are, then I support that. And and I would be there for them, whoever that person is, 100%. But I also believe that I also wish that the world could stop putting their feelings and beliefs onto somebody else,
Yep.
and just say, this is what I believe. And then when the other person says, well, this is what I believe, then I respect that's what you believe, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
And until you do something to hurt me, then I consider you a friend, or at least someone who I can coexist with. But if you're doing something that's hurting me, then I'm going to take it back. I'm going to take a step back, and I'm going to be like, we don't need to be together anymore, or we don't need to associate. But 9 times out of 10, those people it's very rare. Usually it's somebody who says, if you respect me, I respect you, and we're going to just move forward, and we're going to have a great time. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for, first of all, thank you for showing up and doing this interview with us and having this conversation with us, because, these are the conversations that we have to have, even if we're not politically correct, even if we don't always say things right, even if there's an opinion here. The reality is we do not progress as a culture if we don't see each other. We don't progress if we don't see each other. Mark?
Yeah.
Herb, I want to thank you for your insights, your creativity. And if I had to describe you in one word, it would be outstanding.
Yes.
In everything that you do. Thank you so much for joining us on The Psychic and the Doc. And like Dr. Pat said, you have to come back. We want to hear more about your projects and things that you're working on. So you are always welcome here on Transformation Networks, The Psychic and the Doc.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see that film in New Orleans. Cannot wait to see you actually get that script to the series, to a film, to talk about those women in the Civil War. I can't wait.
It's been a real pleasure and talking with you guys. Of course, I'd love to come back and maybe have a better internet connection.
Oh, sounds good to me.
All right.
Thank you. Let's take a short break, everybody. Thank you for tuning us in and turning us on. Olivia, thank you for pushing all the right buttons. And to all of you out there, remember what Herb and what Mark and what I have said. We are entering the realm where we are looking at each other. We're seeing each other. And if we can hold the dignity of the human spirit in the frame of your eyesight, in your vision, if you can hold that, we will be able to get together and closer and change and truly love each other. We'll see you next time. Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into The Psychic and the Doc with Mark Anthony and me, Dr. Pat Baccili, right here on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Hey, look, come back next week so we can explore with you more of life's many challenges and learn from fascinating guests. And you know what? Even Mark and me. We'll connect you and discover insights from people in this life and from the afterlife. Extraordinary problems? Yeah, they do. They require extraordinary solutions. But step into the world of possibilities with us on The Psychic and the Doc. That's every Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time, right here on TransformationTalkRadio.com. That's TransformationTalkRadio.com. And don't forget, we're also live face-to-face on Facebook.com, Transformation Talk Radio.